Hey everybody, in this video we're going to talk about some logistics that have to do with your classes and getting started, specifically how to choose where to teach, your location. So as we're talking about this, I want you to think about these questions. Where would it be best to teach? Where can I serve students effectively? And how can I maximize my profits? With that last question being the most important question while we're in this pre-launch phase. So the different options we're going to discuss are teaching from home or using online platforms to teach, community centers like libraries, rec centers, churches, coffee shops, co-working spaces, and leasing a commercial space. So this is just basically a discussion of the pros and cons of all of these different options. My favorite option is teaching from home. This is where I currently run all of my classes. I have a little home office, as you can see behind me here. So I've got a table, students can sit around it. I can accommodate about 7 or 8 students comfortably here. I've got a computer on one side of the room. I've got a whiteboard over here to the left. And so it's actually really a nice setup. It's essentially a classroom that I have in my home office here. You don't necessarily have to have a separate office space. You can do this from your living room or your dining room or just wherever you can accommodate students and have them sitting comfortably with a little workspace to write and take notes and stuff like that. So with that in mind, my favorite thing about teaching from home is that it is 100% profit. I'm already living here. I'm already paying my mortgage. So I'm not renting space. I'm not paying any additional costs that are associated with utilities or anything else, right? And because of that, I can actually use some of these expenses for tax benefits. I'm not an accountant. I'm not a specialist, so I can't really give you any advice on that other than to talk to a tax professional, get a bookkeeper, get a CPA, talk to somebody to figure out what you can actually write off as a business expense. But in the long run, it's pretty cool, all the stuff that you can do if you're teaching from your home. I love it because I don't have a commute. I walk all of 30 seconds from my bedroom upstairs downstairs to my classroom, so it's pretty easy to get ready. I have complete control over scheduling classes. I don't have to talk to anybody else or figure that out. And it's very comfortable. And I think a lot of students also appreciate the fact that I'm inviting them into my house. It's really building community. The whole Spanish, everybody's heard the Spanish phrase, mi casa es tu casa, right? My house is your house. I'm literally doing that when I invite my students into my home to teach. Some of the downsides are that it requires a clean and quiet space. So if you have roommates or if you have kids that are making a bunch of noise and stuff like that, then it's not going to be an ideal setup. So just keep that in mind. Some students might feel uncomfortable about going to somebody's house. I've had students respond to messages saying, oh, I'm looking for a school. I don't want to go to a house. That happens like 1 out of every 200 or 300 contacts. It's really not very many people that have that objection, but it might come up if you do decide to teach from your house and that comes up. Don't worry too much. Just move on to the next student. In long term, you might have to get set up and get a special license or some type of permit from the city or the county or the state where you're operating from. I did it for a very long time until I decided to look into that, and I got what's called a home occupation business license. So I'm licensed through the city of Denver to operate and teach classes out of my house. It was like $20 to do that. It was a little bit of a hassle, but those types of things are available. And the zoning for my neighborhood is residential, but even with that, I was still able to get this special permission from the city. So if you do that, just keep in mind you might want to look into that. All right, teaching online is something you should definitely consider. I use Zoom to host my classes online with students. The cool thing about that is that you can teach literally from anywhere in the world. I have taken trips and taught classes from other states, from other countries. Just as long as you have a good solid internet connection, it really opens you up to teaching from anywhere in the world. It's very easy to schedule those classes, and it can make classes more accessible to more students. I've actually got one class right now where I'm teaching from Denver. I've got a student that lives on the western slope about 6 hours away from me, another student that's up in the mountains maybe 2 hours away from me, and another student that is in South Dakota. So that's what I mean by it's accessible to more students. And then you just might have other students that don't want to deal with traffic and stuff like that. The cons here are that many Spanish-speaking students are extremely opposed to online options. They feel like they've tried it before. This is more of a mindset or a perception that they have. They're thinking about like, oh, I did Duolingo, which is an online class, so that doesn't work for me. Or they may have had experience with some other type of digital course that's not really interactive. It's just for studying English, but it doesn't have like the live participation. So that's just something to be aware of. Some of the activities in the program are not going to go over very well online. For example, I have mixed into the slides videos that you can just click on the link and it opens up YouTube. And so it might be a song that we're doing as a listening activity. It might be a little clip from a TV show, or sometimes I even watch full-length TV shows in class with the more advanced levels. And that stuff is just not going to come across very well through Zoom. So in those situations, I just have students do it as like a homework activity or after class. So that's what I mean by some of the activities you might not be able to do online. Other than that, it's the exact same program. You're going to be using and sharing a PowerPoint presentation, and that comes across just like I'm doing with you right now. So it's going to come across online the same way. There are some technical issues that might arise. For example, I've had it happen where the internet goes out while I'm in the middle of a class. So that's inconvenient, but I think everybody typically understands that sometimes that's just part of life. You'll obviously need a little bit more digital fluency than just being able to click forward on a PowerPoint presentation. It's pretty simple. If you've never used Zoom or you've never hosted your own Zoom, it's just a matter of opening the presentation and then sharing it. And then there's some other, instead of writing on the whiteboard, I can use Zoom's features to actually write on the screen or even draw or something like that. So it's a learning experience if you haven't done it, but it's pretty simple to learn. And there's all kinds of videos and stuff. The last thing is that initially, you should definitely use a professional account. I know some people that teach with the free Google Meets option. I'm not a big fan of it, but some people do it, so that's a free option. But I definitely like the Zoom Pro account. It costs about $20 a month, and then you can record your classes and stuff like that. But anyways, that $20 monthly fee obviously will eat into some of your profits, but it's not a huge expense. It is an expense. It's $20 a month. It's obviously more than zero from teaching from home in person. So just keep that in mind. All right, the next step in line with that is to use an online platform to teach, like italki or Preply. I think there's another one called Baselang. There's a whole bunch of these online platforms. And they can be a great resource, I think, in the short term for helping you find students and start teaching immediately, because it's a platform and they're marketing and they're advertising and they're signing students up to their platform, and then students can kind of choose from a list of teachers and schedule a class that way. So it makes it pretty easy. And it's definitely a great way to get some practice right away, especially doing one-on-one lessons. And it might be something to consider doing for the next 3 to 6 months as you're getting comfortable with the program. Long term, though, I'm not a big fan of these platforms. A lot of teachers that are doing this training with me right now are coming from those online platforms. So most of what I'm sharing is coming from what I hear from them. I actually have never used one of these online platforms. I've never needed to. I've always been able to get students on my own from my local community. But what the teachers tell me that they don't like about these platforms is that they're going to take a commission, right? They're doing the work for you to get the students. They're spending money on advertising and they have overhead. So they're going to take a percentage of what you are earning. So let's say, a student pays you $50 for the class. Well, the online platform charges you $25 or something like that. It's different. Each platform's a little bit different. So you'll just have to figure out what it looks like with that platform. And you don't have a lot of control with that. That's basically set by the platform, and yeah, that's it. um, I think the main thing, though, is that you're going to be competing with dozens, maybe even hundreds of other teachers. You can be competing with teachers that are living in a different country where the cost of living is significantly lower. For example, I know in Ecuador, there are an abundance of teachers that are living in Ecuador where $5 an hour can be a lot of money. And if you're living here in the United States, you're competing with somebody that's charging $5 an hour, and that can be a little bit complicated. So you'll have less control over your pricing. You might have to schedule classes at certain times according to what the platform dictates. And then you're not going to have many opportunities for true branding, which comes into play later as you continue to grow your business. So overall, you just have a lot less control, but it can be a good thing in the short term. Okay, let's talk about community centers. So when I say community centers, I'm just talking about places out in the community where people gather. This could be a coffee shop. This could be a rec center. It could be a library. Maybe if you go to church, your local church will let you use a room to teach classes. So I actually started this way about 20 years ago. And I would get students to meet me at a coffee shop. So there's a coffee shop that I really liked, and we would meet, and I just open up my laptop and we, sit there and have a coffee and talk and go through the lesson. So the good things about community centers is they're typically free or they have a very low cost. And because you're meeting out in a public place, it can be a little bit more comfortable for students that might be opposed to going to your house. It might be more comfortable for you if you're opposed to inviting students to your house. So there's definitely an increased comfort level depending on the situation. And typically speaking, these are going to be places that your students already know about, right? So let's say you choose your local library and you just say, oh, I give classes out of the library over on 5th Street. And so students already know exactly where that is. The downsides of doing this is that obviously you should request permission from the owner or manager or whoever's working there just to make sure that it's going to be okay. Big downside is there's often going to be some background noise and some distractions. It typically doesn't matter too much if you're just getting started and you're saying charging $20 an hour. If you get up to the point where you're charging $100 an hour, then obviously that background noise and distractions is going to take away from the quality of the service you're providing. So short term, pretty good. Long term, probably not so great. You have literally no control over the space. You can't control who else is going to be there or when things are going on. Sometimes if it's like a community room at a library, you might not be able to schedule it out very far in advance. And you might be subject to the whims of the library. Like if they host a special event, they might say, oh, by the way, next Tuesday, you can't use the room. So that can be a little inconvenient. And that gets into the limited availability issues. And This is very rare, but it has happened. I've seen it happen where somebody starts a program at a library or a rec center or something like that. And when they see that it's successful, the organization itself decides to launch a competing service with you. Hopefully, they would actually extend the invitation to you to do that, but I have seen people get pushed out and they say, oh, wow, this teacher started this cool program. I think we should actually do this and now offer this as a service for our patrons. So it might happen. I wouldn't worry too much about it, but hey, it could happen. So might as well know about that. Increasingly, there are what's called a co-working or a flexible workspace. So these are typically going to be in a private office building somewhere with a pretty professional setup. Like they'll have a receptionist and they have a kind of a like a meeting area with coffee and tea and a refrigerator and stuff like that. So initially, it can look very professional. It's already furnished, and so you don't have to do anything to set it up. They typically have very low commitment. You can literally just schedule it for an hour at a time if you want to. Some of them also offer more dedicated offices, so you could rent your own private office, which would be 100% yours. And sometimes these can be scalable. So if you know they have other offices and other conference rooms available, so if you get in there and you start growing and you want to work with another teacher, then you can just rent another room, and it can be pretty easy to do that. What I don't like about co-working spaces is right off the bat, you're going to have to pay for it. And they typically charge around $25 an hour. I've seen more, I've seen less, but yeah, it's typically right off the bat, you're going to be paying $25 an hour. So obviously, if you're starting and teaching for $20 an hour, well, $25 an hour would erase all of your profit. So not a good idea. Outside of that, sometimes you can rent your own private office space in these places for anywhere from like $200 to $500 a month. Again, that's just going to be eating out of your profits. So I don't recommend it necessarily to get started. They might be a better fit for once you start growing and scaling. Another bad thing about these is that you might run into scheduling conflicts. So if you're doing private one-on-one classes, it shouldn't be too much of a problem. But if you end up doing the monthly group classes that we're going to be talking about in later videos, then you might get into issues where you run into a scheduling conflict. Somebody else rents the conference room before you get a chance to reserve it, and that might create some problems. So if you do it, definitely try and schedule things far out. But then, again, as a negative thing, maybe you reserve it and you schedule it, and then your students stop studying. So there's a lot of risk that can be associated with these co-working spaces. But I definitely know teachers that do it and have a lot of success with it. One thing to be aware of is, and I'm going to be talking about this in another video here, but prime time teaching hours are typically going to be evenings and weekends, and a lot of these co-working spaces are not set up. They're catering to the 9 to 5 business crowd, and so they might not be available in the evenings or on the weekends, or just they might not be easily accessible. So overall, you just have a whole lot less control. So keep all of that in mind. But hey, go out and look to see what's in your community, and if you find a good space, then go for it. Finally, commercial leases. So this is where you're going to be renting your own full-time dedicated space. And these are, long-term. These can be very good. I ran a language school in an office space here in Denver for about 8 years. So I did this. That's actually how I started the original language school here in Denver. The good thing about this is it's creating a very professional image for your students. It gives you full control over your business. You can use the classrooms 24/7. You've got your own dedicated space, so you can decorate it however you want to. And you should be able to host multiple classes and hire teachers. So If you decide you want to open up your own full-blown language school, this is probably what you're going to do in the long term. But the cons are that these are typically going to be expensive. And when I say that, you're going to have your fixed costs, which are going to be things like rent. You typically have to pay for insurance. You'll have to pay extra utilities, so internet, you might have electric or gas bills. You might have to pay for trash. You might have to pay for cleaning services. So these fees can start to add up. And another thing is you have to be pretty sure about the location and your commitment to doing this, because they're typically going to want a long-term lease commitment. You might have to pay a big security deposit. You might have to pay first and last month rent up front and then sign into like a 2 to 5 year long lease. So that can create some other problems down the road. Finally, you're also going to have to buy furniture, pay for signage, and all kinds of other stuff that go with that. So I definitely don't recommend, if you're just getting started with this program, to go out and rent a big 2, 3, 4,000 square foot office space. Definitely go with easier, flexible, and lower risk options to get started. All right, so we've talked about all these different options. My final verdict is that I think you should try to teach out of your home, just as long as you have the right setup. This is going to be your highest potential for profit, because you're not getting any additional expenses, and you're also going to have those long-term tax benefits. You can write off certain, if you have a mortgage and you're using 10% of your office, or I'm sorry, 10% of your house to teach your classes, well, you can, consider 10% of your mortgage payment as a tax write-off, and you can pay your other utility bills, and you can run a lot of this other stuff through your business. Of course, talk to a professional, an accountant, to figure out exactly what you can do, but that all goes back to your profitability, and so I like it. When you're teaching from home, it's very flexible. You can teach online, you can do private classes, you can host small group classes. It's just win-win for everybody involved when you teach out of your house. So your next steps, your activity, is to do a little bit of research. I definitely recommend to start with a free or low-cost space, whether that's teaching from your house or from a local community center. You just want to make sure that it's quiet, that it's safe, and that it's easy to access for your ideal students. And once you've picked a location, schedule a private class with a student to see how it goes. You can always change it if it doesn't go well, if it's too noisy, if it's something like that going on, then you can change it when the time's right. But go ahead and get started. Let's do this.